Hey, Nick, wake up.
Ein Bier, bitte. Ein Bier.
Do you even remember what country you're in right now?
No, I'm pretty jet lagged. I went to sleep at 7:00 last night and I heard about it this morning. So, yeah. When you don't help put 4 kids to bed, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
Understandably.
After you've been gone for a week in Germany.
Yeah.
Next time I go to the emo, you guys must come with me.
Looks like it was a blast.
Go to emo.
Looks like it was a blast.
Cool. It was awesome, yeah. It's like IMTS, but probably 30% more OEMs. Like, there's just so many different technology providers over there because that's where it all originates. Mm-hmm. And I had this same conversation maybe 5 times. It's all the technology, it originates in either Germany or Austria or like Japan or some of the Asian countries. And then we inherit it here and put it on display at the IMTS. But all the good media and the good marketing starts here.
That's
and
right.
They inherit it over there. And we had a conversation about possibly making ships Europe.
That would be a blast.
Yeah, brush up on your German, boys.
We'd have to go record there frequently.
We could have jet lag during the episodes and have espresso. So, who we got today?
Well, we are doing another episode of the Machine Shop MBA series, and we got a bunch of the CLA crew to talk about advanced financial topics that have to do with numbers that Nick, you and I don't know anything about. So at least we got a bunch of smart guys here.
Yeah, Mike's got a whole show about numbers, and I'm here for comic relief.
Nick, I think what you said there about marketing is relevant to accounting as well. I think it starts on this side of the pond, all the good accounting and finance ideas, and then they make it across.
Yeah, good. We're good at like moving money around. They're good at moving products around. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So John, welcome back to the show. Let's introduce your crew here. You've been on a few times. And maybe start with yourself, and we'll go to Erik and Mike here.
We got a full house.
We do. Yeah. Thank you, Mike, for having me back here. I think last time I said people typically don't invite me back for a second time unless it's the principal calling me down to the office. So must have done something right if I'm here for a third time. Maybe it was maybe you're just Wu-Tang fans.
Right.
Or Liverpool.
Hey,
Liverpool fans, they come back. They got a full season pass.
That's right. They're off to a good start. So
exactly.
I'm Jon Hughes with CLA. I'm a CFO consultant. I have the pleasure of working with shop owners, helping with monthly accounting closes and financial statements, and helping them to work on their business and use their accounting function as a tool. Here from CLA, we also have my colleagues Erik Skie and Mike Estes, who are both part of our manufacturing team.
Welcome.
Danke, gentlemen. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, there you
Thanks
go.
for having us.
I
Yeah.
like that. Have you been to Germany, Erik?
Many, many times. For
That's
business, a lot more in the southern part, Stuttgart, those areas, a lot of where the automotive centers are. And we have a lot of shops that we serve that are U.S. subsidiaries of some of those family-owned businesses in Germany.
Yeah,
Nice.
The Mittelstand.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that word?
Yep.
You know what that is, Mike and Paul?
I do not.
So it's like this German term for kind of like the multi-generational middle class family manufacturing or engineering type firms that we're kind of like an example of that.
And it's amazing too, because it's not uncommon to see 3rd, 4th, 5th generation businesses in those countries. So they've really done a nice job of sort of professionalizing and making the business first and maybe family second, right? So they take care of the business and the business takes care of the family. But I got to be honest, Nick, the last time I was in Germany was for Oktoberfest last year. So it wasn't business. It was just fun.
I have a long Oktoberfest story we'll have to save for another time, but yeah, I think I saved this kid's life who was not ready for it.
Oh.
He was not ready for Oktoberfest. I'll just leave it at that. It's not for the faint of heart. Mike, tell us about you. Mike, is it Estes?
Estes, yeah. If you're in the South, I say Estes. I don't know why, but it's Estes. I grew up in manufacturing, grew up on the shop floor, was a shop rat. on the cost accounting side, everything from metal stamping, galvanizing, all of the things. Worked for the same company for 32 and a half years, became their CFO, went to work for their largest competitor, then finally made my way to CLA. And since I've been at CLA, I've been working with pre and post acquisition productivity improvements, helping people understand variances to their numbers, and making sure that we get a little bit of financial acumen into all of the businesses that we touch.
I love that.
At CLA, we refer to Mike as the cost accounting godfather. He is a wealth of knowledge, and it's tremendous to be able to work with Mike.
Well, my first thought when I heard his background was like, my grandfather used to call these finance guys who didn't get manufacturing, he's just a bean counter, and every once in a while we'd get a finance guy who really was on the shop floor and knew the business, knew how to do cost accounting and what can be a very confusing industry. And he'd be like, I like this guy. He's made a partnership. So
I don't think they even teach it anymore. So it's becoming fewer and far between.
Manufacturers, what is your biggest headache? Is it measuring and improving profitability, gaining efficiencies with AI and automation, maybe tightening up your cybersecurity, maybe getting your business ready to sell? At CLA, their goal is to know you and help you with challenges like these and more. Every day, CLA helps manufacturers tap into millions in revenue and cost savings, like one manufacturer that boosted capacity and revenues by 15 to 20%. Visit CLAconnect.com to hear real success stories and learn how you can grow your top and bottom line. Well, this is a great crew, I think, to talk about, some of these advanced, kind of accounting and finance tools that shops can use to really kind of get to that next level. And Jon, we talked on the last show just about how to kind of turn finance and accounting into more of a competitive advantage than a regulatory task. And I think this time we'll get to drill a lot deeper. If we start like with the big picture and you just look across, your clients and shops you've been in and so forth, what are some of the common themes you see, that people are doing it right and people are doing it wrong?
Maybe I'll jump in, Mike. I know this is, we call it advanced financial topics, however we want to frame it. I would say the most profitable shops we work with are the ones that keep it simple. And I would say sometimes complexity actually works against you. And it creates silos and divides in individuals' understandings of how you really make money in manufacturing. And at the end of the day, it's really, really simple. The most profitable businesses we work with, the most profitable manufacturers, in simplest terms, do a great job of matching capacity with demand. So what do I mean by that? The cost of entry take a typical machine shop. You've got facility costs. You've got incredible equipment costs. You've got all sorts of smart people in the pre-press, engineering, fixturing, tooling areas of the business, right? Just to get a part to the floor. Right. And then you got programmers and everybody else that we work with that helps execute on the floor. And the majority of those costs in a manufacturing company are fixed. Okay. And the way I say it to shop owners sometimes is picture every cost you incur on a daily basis. And now picture not doing anything today. You don't make a single part. How many of those costs go away?
Not many of them.
Not very many.
And so you still have the machines.
Exactly.
The people are still employed.
And so if you're going to have that capacity, let's say you're going to have the ability to deliver 10,000 hours of work and you're consistently delivering 8,000 or 8,500, it's going to be hard to make good money because the customer will pay you a fair price for what you do, but they're not going to pay you a premium to cover those excess capacity costs. And so, a lot of shops will talk about pricing and they'll talk about costing. Very few are talking about the capacity management side of it. And if you look at most shops, that is the biggest differentiator between those that are really profitable and those that are marginally profitable.
Because even the direct labor costs are somewhat fixed. I mean, not on a job by job basis, but you need those people so badly. It's not like you can just let them go if you don't have work in the shop because they're going to go find somewhere else and then you're stuck.
That's such a good point, Paul.
Yeah, I mean,
we think about that all the time.
You got 8 hours of you got 8 hours you're going to pay them for, whether they do 4 hours of work, 2 hours of work, or 6 hours of work, right? And Paul,
Right.
you've invested so much in training and development that if you don't pay them for the 8 hours, they'll go next door and get it.
Yeah, you bet.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've certainly, I know, as we've cycled through over the years of, busy times, slow times, busy times. And I remember maybe the first time we went through that cycle, the down cycle during COVID, we did try to sit back and go, okay, well, where could we trim? And there wasn't really space to trim. I mean, it was a large investment to keep everything ready to go. But, in a lot of cases, like, well, if we did do some layoffs, how are we ever going to get that skill set back?
Mm-hmm.
And you just knew you weren't. Like, it would be gone forever.
Yep.
And
So,
it's
Erik,
so dramatic. It's so dramatic too, Mike, because you'll take a $10 million shop that makes no money, and right next door it'll be a $12 million shop that does the exact same thing with the same cost structure, and they're making $1 million a year. So
Right.
all of that profit comes in that last bit of incremental work, right? Because 90% of what you do is just covering the overhead.
Mm-hmm.
The last episode I was on, we were talking about cash flow. We were really talking about steps you can take to make incremental improvements within the business. And to Erik's point, my experience has been the same with utilizing capacity and trying to drive profitability. It's what are those steps that we can take to bring in that next order or start to utilize some of those work centers where we have excess capacity. And it's about those little improvements that we can make, one quote, one order at a time to really leverage those resources that we have in the business. And when we think about, taking on an order where we have the equipment and we have the people available, what's the contribution there to the business to, produce that part, to ship that order? It's pretty significant when we're saying, hey, the variable costs here are really the materials, or some outside processing. And, to the point there about that you made, Paul, about the labor really being a fixed cost, for me, that was kind of a breakthrough moment to think of it that way, because you're right. If we're slower this week, we're still going to pay our people 40 hours. We're not going to send them home because we need them, and we're not going to be slower in the future.
Yeah. And you have to work on efficiencies so the jobs that you take, you can do it as profitably and as least amount of labor cost as possible, and hopefully get more work through the door. But without what I call positive sales pressure, where you have more demand than you have capacity for, you're oftentimes sitting with spindles idle and you just don't have enough work, and I know there's a lot of shops in that position today, this year, just not as strong as they want to be. But there's such a competitive situation for machinists, for programmers, for all that direct labor. You got to consider it basically a fixed cost.
So, Paul, I love that word, positive sales pressure. We always say in our meetings, like, we want sales to be the bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
Because put the pressure on me. That's great. I love when sales is the bottleneck because now I can go get more.
Yeah.
And Mike, we had a long conversation this morning. This question's maybe for both Mikes too, but Mike, you didn't have a bunch of 5-axis milling work, and you believe in your ability to sell and bring the work in, and you bought a 5-axis mill because you wanted that kind of work. You liked the profitability behind it, and now you're talking about your second and maybe third mill that's doing that kind of work. So you were able to create all this capacity, and then because of like who you are, the brand you've built, and then that person you hired who was super good at bringing work with him, you were able to match that capacity right away. Brilliant job. Like, not every shop has that. The professor of pain running the show. So,
well, I could say it was very uncertain in that it felt like a big gamble, but it definitely has paid off.
So for the other Mike Estes, when you were in that seat, that working in the shop and leading in the shop, how did your business go about, like, when to increase capacity and when to take those risks, knowing
it's a double-edged sword, right? I listened to all of the comments there, and there is bad business as well, right? And if you load your shop up without understanding your costs, you can load your shop up with bad business. which keeps you from taking good business. So having to understand what all those cost buckets are and making sure that you quote those projects at the right cost, at the right margin, at the right time, so that you are running at close to capacity, so that you're absorbing all of those costs. That's as critical as getting that next order, right? Because you can take bad orders as well. And so that's where I see where increasing the financial acumen of the folks that are there and making sure that they understand, and especially in your sales group, that we want good orders. We want orders, but we also want good orders to make sure that we're maximizing the profit and utilizing those assets the best we can.
So on that topic, if I could, Mike Estes, I've always been a strong advocate for activity-based estimating and activity-based costing, right? Not every piece of equipment costs the same amount. You're probably not going to equally balance and fill up your entire shop if you're quoting a 2-axis lathe at 5-axis mill, rates. So what's your thought on, making sure you're balancing those costs and quoting appropriately for the equipment and people that are needed for those particular jobs?
And that's a real skill, right? I mean, it's not something that people come up with overnight. There's a skill to understanding each of the costs of each of the machines and the skill sets that go with each of those machines, because each one of them may be different. So understanding those cost buckets and maybe, and you're right, getting into the activity-based costing and making sure that, you're associating each activity with a cost and then putting those costs into each one of those buckets, right? And that's what a lot of people struggle with. There's two schools of thought: keeping it simple, right, which we talked about early. Let's keep it as simple as we can. Everything is pretty much fixed, so let's go to the fix. And then if your shop has multiple opportunities for different types of work, you have to understand those and put that activity-based costing in place so that you're costing each activity correctly.
Yeah. And, I know in our experience, I'd be curious to hear from what you guys think. Mike, I love the way you just put that, kind of the two schools of thought. And I think we use a hybrid, based on the definitions you just said, right? So a lot of my, using like the equipment example, a lot of my equipment is fully depreciated. It was acquired in an acquisition. Just, I don't necessarily have a cost of each pieces of those equipment. And again, even since then, they've been fully depreciated. But then we do have new equipment that is a lot easier to put, a resource rate on, that we need to, when that spindle's turning, we need this much out of it. So I know, and in the same way, I think one of the harder things for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, be curious what you guys think, but, also how do you price automation, right? So, when you look at it from I think for the most part, a lot of people in our business quote on some combination of a rate they need for the hours it's going to take to do something, right? So that includes their labor rate, a resource rate, whatever. Well, your labor rate might go to next to nothing, right? If you're running on a fully robot tended lathe or something. My philosophy on that is I still basically charge the same labor rate for that because I made the investment in the robot. That robot's just replacing the putting it in and taking it out. But I've also done enough job costing on the jobs we have run on the robots that I know I can run that job on a robot or without. And when I run it with a robot, I've got about 20% of the labor hours in it that I would normally have, because you still have to set it up and prove it out and all those types of things. Curious how you guys would maybe look at that from a hybrid perspective, and how do you price those types of activities?
Yeah, we had a individual shop that we were working with who had a fully depreciated laser that was cutting a lot of steel, and they were not pricing the cost of that laser into any of their products. It was, to your point, fully reserved. It was not costing them anything, so they were winning a hell of a lot of business because it was low cost. And all of a sudden, guess what? That laser crapped out and they had to go spend, $2 million on a new laser. All of a sudden, the depreciation shot through the roof. And now when they started quoting business, they found out that they were no longer competitive to the folks that they were quoting against because, they weren't including those costs as they should have been, even though they were fully reserved. So I like what you said. I mean, look at it as a full resource. Whether that resource is fully reserved or not, let's capture the cost of that resource in our costs and in our pricing.
Manufacturing isn't a one-size-fits-all. It's built on materials, machines, and the methods behind them. In What's Your Method, we talk with the leaders at Methods Machine Tools about how they're helping manufacturers in aerospace, mold making, and machining turn complexity into opportunity.
Hey, Paul, do you know much about EDM?
You know, my shop didn't have one, but I've been in probably 100 shops that have both wire and sinker and hole poppers. So yeah, it's an amazing technology. It kind of blows my mind how it works.
It looks cool, and the reason I'm asking is so like my largest customer and really probably our biggest product line we make for them. We've done some prototype for them this year that we've had to outsource the EDM because we don't have it. So we've done all the other machine work and then outsourced, the EDM part. But if the prototype's successful and this entire product line switches over to that platform, I'm going to have to look at it. And
you need to get one.
Yeah. So I'm trying to learn a little bit about like what in the world is, because it seems scary.
Well, it's so different than traditional machining that, there's a lot to know. But in fact, it's a pretty simple concept. And why don't we call up Bill at Methods and have him walk us through it a little bit?
Hey, Bill.
Hey, guys. What's going on today? How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Bill. Good to see you again.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah, Paul
good,
and I
good.
were just talking. I've got a customer that, I might potentially have to be looking at EDM, and I'm trying to figure out, does that fit my shop and what that transition looks like. And so Paul suggested we call you to maybe talk about that for a sec.
Sure. Welcome to answer any questions that you might have. EDM, electrical discharge machining with wire. It's considered by some people to be like black magic, but it's really not. It's you've got the similar G codes for programming, for circular linear interpolation, just a couple maybe miscellaneous codes, preparatory codes, miscellaneous functions for turning coolants on or flushing on, different things like that. But to say that it's different or something to be scared of really shouldn't be. The controllers that we have is a FANUC-based control, so it's very easy to take those G code programs and translate, some of the other programs into numerical code. Easiest, put a part on a table, use the wire to pick it up for rotation or the center of the hole to find your zero. You can use a wire. We do have some probing functions that can be put on there to save on consumables and to speed up processes. Also for process validation, if you're trying to size a hole, make sure it's correct before you remove it. I'm not saying measure it, but a lot of different things you can build upon. So strap your part down. No need to indicate it. Use the wire or the probe to do the pickup. Go into your technology page, and basically there's a list of questions in there that you answer, whether you've got open conditions in your nozzles. That's when your nozzles aren't sealed on a part for flushing. Material, wire size, things like that. And then the result is basically which finish do you want to achieve on your part and which tolerance do you want to achieve. That automatically gives you the technology that you need or your speeds and feeds if you're a chip or mill guy, and select those. And basically, obviously a little bit more in detail, basically, thread your wire, start your machine. Actually, you don't even have to thread it, start your machine. The wire will thread automatically and we'll start cutting the part for you. And then there's a bunch of different types of parts, dies, punches, dies, some automotive parts, aerospace parts, medical parts, different things. So it's really not a black magic, or something that you should be afraid of. It's really very easy to learn. It just takes few days to understand the concept, and then you're up and running. And then after that, as far as our product line, we're there to answer your questions, support you, and carry you on through your product, whether it be prototyping, setting up, programming issues, any questions you might have. We're there, our applications team, to answer them at any time. So it's pretty easy. There's a lot more to it than that. I understand as you get more and more involved, but you might hear me use this term a lot. That's what I call the good pain, right? This is where you're learning the process of the machine. You're growing with the machine. It's like no difference than changing a wire, than changing an end mill and having a different coating on it. You're going to get a different result. You can push it a little bit faster. There's things you can do with it. You've got a wire that maybe is because of a boss or something next to it, your heads have to be separated more. It's nothing than a longer tool holder with a longer adapter on it. So you may have to slow things down because, you might get chatter or something like that. So the premise from turning and milling to EDM is the same. It's just how you apply it, the tool versus the wire, the workpiece, material, and then you've got water and coolant that all react in that fashion. More on the wire side, the water creates vibration and cooling purposes, where on the chip side, it's used just for basically cooling and chip flushing purposes. But again, it is very easy to use. Part down, use the wire to align it, pick your technology, and then start your cutting.
That's cool. So it sounds like the control is somewhat conversational. You put in the parameters and it will select the feeds and speed, the wire feed and all those things for you, the voltage or amperages.
Yep, absolutely. So it depends. So there's a lot of, like, when you look at the technology on the screen, there's maybe 15 different items, like on time, off time for the electricity. You got your water flows, you've got servo voltage, different things in there that control the spark, the wire, the gap between the wire and the workpiece, just a lot of different functions. And as an operator or an owner, if you see these, you might be saying to yourself, like, wow, it's not just a speed or a feed. But if you come back a little bit and you select the proper technology, all of those settings, you normally don't change any of them. There's very few that you play with, maybe you're on or an off time, or even in our control, we have a function called simple adjust that if for some reason you have a part that's just a little bit different and you're running, I'll call it in distress, where maybe it's not running as optimum, you can just tap a button plus or minus to ease the conditions, or even to go faster if you're looking for speed, and the machine will react to that and basically perform. So it's very easy. The keys, as I say, before the good pain, as you get more involved in the process, is to learn the pulse modes, which are the different waves, how the spark's generated, but very, very easy to use. Just, again, select your material, thickness, surface finish, accuracy, and the dependable technologies in the control will give you the results that the technology is showing you. And in most instances, it's always better than what's shown on the screen.
So I'm gonna back us way back and just real quick. Can you give me just kind of an overview of, like, generally where I would want to choose EDM over, a subtractive machining technology or a more traditional machining?
Well, again, depends what industry you're in. If you have some parts that are very, very thin walled, where you have stresses, you can't hold them. The wire EDM doesn't invoke any stresses. You can basically, as long as you can clamp the part where it doesn't move on you, which is very lightly, and that's, you also have to take into consideration water pressure. You can cut that part or the very thin wall without distorting it. Some other areas would be very small radiuses in the corners. So you got 10 thousandths radius in the corners on small parts. You can't do that with an end mill. You can do it with the side of the end mill, but depending on the geometry of the part, you might not be able to reach it. If you had a bore that's intersecting several bores and you're trying to get a real good finish and an accurate size on it, as you know, on a milling machine, you've got that interruption that's going on. So you've got, you have to worry about vibration. You have to worry about recutting the chips, so you're worried about surface finish and sizing, where on the wire EDM, you don't have any of that. And then after the fact, there's no burr, so you don't have to worry. I mean, you may have to deburr it, but there's no burr that's hanging over that you have to go in there and scrape off. And you have, like in the medical industry, aesthetics is very important. So when you're cutting thin parts, and you don't have to have anybody deburr it, all the parts look the same. Where if I had 10 different people deburring those parts, they wouldn't look symmetrical, and that would be cause for concern if the part's right or the teeth sharp, things like that. So
Sure.
You may also have aerospace parts where you're cutting out some big pieces in Inconel, and due to the size of the parts, you're limited to like the bar size that you can buy from the steel supplier. Well, maybe you can buy a plate stock that's a lot bigger and take your parts and nest them in there and run them in the wire EDM and cut them out in, 3, 4, 5, 8 hours, whatever it takes to cut them without anybody standing there. And now you're not doing all that banging on your very expensive 5-axis mill to do all the finish work. So is it ideal? Is it perfect? No, maybe not. But when you start looking at the cost of the material, what your yield is now for the material, the time you're saving by running the machine unattended at night to do other jobs in that 5-axis, which are at a much higher rate, it can turn out to be very, make it more lucrative and very profitable without having, again, you don't have to have an operator stand there to run the EDM. Once it's running, it runs unattended. And with a good wire feeder, wire threader, and repair system, the machine should repair its wire and go right back into the cut for you and continue to process parts. So when you come in the morning, or even if you start up on a Sunday night early in the morning, you come in Monday morning, you've got a whole plate that's just about done for you, not sitting in water and ready to go. So a lot of different uses, insurance policies for companies that maybe go out and buy form tools. And, sometimes you just run into those situations where the setup men have a bad start and don't have enough form tools to get through the job, and you don't want to break the machine down. Well, the wire EDM is perfect. It's not going to cut the most accurate form tool like a grinding machine, but it's going to be very, very close to that. Is it going to get you through the job? Yes, it's going to, and it's going to be very accurate and give you some nice finishes. So again, those are the learning pains of when something happens, like, how are we going to get another tool? How are we going to get this? It's going to take, 10 days to get that. It's going to cost us a fortune. Well, if you had an EDM, you cut that form tool, maybe 2, and you're off and running. Now, would you want to do them all on there? Probably not, but maybe for your shop, if you had some special tools and you want to turn around a quick job for a customer, you've just done something that maybe your competitors can't do and turned around a job, and that's what attracts your customers back to you, right? Being able to give them something that they need, a value-added service at a minimal cost. And EDM is good for that.
That's very helpful, certainly for my consideration. I guess we're less than a year out from IMTS now. I assume we'll be able to see this technology at the methods booth at IMTS. And in the meantime, if someone wanted to learn more, how do they get a hold of you, Bill?
Yeah, so they can get a hold of me. They can actually contact Methods Machines on our website, Methods Machine Tools. There's some information they can fill out there. A local sales, when that lead is filled out, that lead is immediately forwarded to one of our sales team members or our dealers around the country. They normally react to that within 3-4 hours, maybe, and sometimes very, very quickly, just because we're trying to make sure customers are aware that we see their question, their concern there, and make contact with them. And then should there be a need for the salesman to get me involved as the product manager, then they'll contact me, or we visit as we go around, or they're free to email me at any time, wburba@methodsmachine.com. And I love answering questions. My joy in the job is that solving the problem. Like when you try something, you're pushing the button and it doesn't work, and then you finally get the code right. That 1 second is the adrenaline that I live for. And providing that solution, or what we call a method, to a customer is really what we've been doing since 1958. It's a third generation family-owned business that believes in customer support and loyalty. So we're trying to do as much as we can to support the customers through service, applications, and sales, to provide them with the means that they need to make themselves successful.
Awesome. Well, I definitely learned something today. I did not know EDMs could do all those types of things.
I didn't either.
Self-repairing the wire, form to it, and like the applications. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. That was awesome.
Great. We also have, just the last mention, we do have a new feature that's just been released on our wire EDMs called the wire savings feature. So there's a lot of talk out there in the industry about wire EDMs can save a percentage of wire in this application and that application. Fanuc has just added this to our simple adjust, so customers that are looking to save on their wire consumption without having to adjust technology, because normally when you slow your wire down, technology changes a little bit. Fanuc is taking care of all that inside the control. So we've seen, we're right now in the test cuts that we've done, and Fanuc has provided up to 50% savings in wire, which is huge with the new tariffs that are coming on.
Yeah.
So why I say we can have the ability to save you up to 50% in your cutting of the different materials in your machine. So some exciting things to look forward to, and the RoboCut is a great machine to look at.
Yeah, that could be some pretty significant savings. Well, Bill, thank you so much for the info. I will definitely be in touch as we work through these parts with my customer. So,
yeah, thank you very much for the time, guys. I really appreciate it. Anytime.
Yep. Thanks, Bill.
All right, shop owners, listen up here. I think all of us know we are in one of the most capital intensive businesses there is, and margins are tight, and we're always fighting issues. And then when we make money, what do we do with it? Stock market's up and down all over the place. Well, I get asked a lot about where can I invest my money? I'm a firm believer as business owners, you've got to invest in yourself first. You need to reinvest capital into yourself. So the number one thing that I've done in this industry investing was ProShop ERP. We've been using ProShop since 2018, and my payback literally was within weeks. With their per user based pricing, I knew when I made the decision, I only needed to save my workers roughly 1 hour per month. We saw within the first week, we were saving multiple hours per day. That type of ROI just doesn't come along very often. Outside of that, the real value has been able to quickly implement best practices across my entire shop from the time we get an order to the time we ship it, scaling my business with confidence, being able to go out and know that I can deliver on my promise to deliver quality parts to my customer, and then gaining insights into every job, employee, machine, and every process in our business to really drive efficiency and look for opportunities for improvement. That's where the real value in your business drives. So visit ProShopERP.com, book a demo, and start realizing ROI today. That's ProShopERP.com.
I mean, to me, what the machine costs you is only a portion of that equation when you talk about estimating. It's really what will the market bear for that piece of equipment and that part that you're selling them, right? So if you're, again, if just the simplified version, if you're bidding, a simple 2-axis turn part against any shop that can do that, out of a garage, the market rate for that's going to be fairly low because there's so much competition. But if you're doing a complex five-axis aerospace part, not only is the equipment more expensive, of course, but just the skill set and the number of shops that are competing with you is less. So there's going to be more margin built into that, because of the market.
Yeah, Paul. So what my mind is kind of doing right now is like the complexity of the equipment, whether it's huge equipment that's doing 3-4 axis work, or whether it's just multi-axis or multitasking work or very precise work, like that's what sets the rate you can charge, and that's kind of what puts you into more of a niche. And then when Mike was talking about automation, to me, that's what tells you how many labor-free hours you can add to that rate. Assuming, we talked about 8 hours of paying for the labor. You've got a guy working for 8 hours. If that guy or girl can keep that machine running 24 hours a day, then you got 16 free hours because of the automation. But it doesn't necessarily change the rate you can charge, because that's determined by the complexity of the equipment and the niche that you're in. That's how my mind thinks of it.
I like it.
Yeah, 100% agree with this. And I think this gets back also to the conversation that we had around capacity. We're really trying to price the work at the market. You have some insight as to the complexity of the part, maybe some history there that's informing your decision making. And then we think about the cost accounting. Well, we understand, what it costs us to make this part. It's really evaluating, do we want to take this work on? Do we have the capacity for that? And ultimately, by doing that, how does that affect the financial results of the shop? How are we utilizing those resources that we have? But ultimately, the pricing is going to come down to the market, right? And it's not as easy, right? We're all trying to figure out where to set pricing and what the market is. And I know, that's not an easy thing to determine. But, when we're talking about capacity, if we have excess capacity in our shop, right, it's increasing our costs, but the market isn't going to pay us any more for that excess capacity. So how do we price this to the market and then utilize the resources that we have? I think that's really kind of the big picture question that we're trying to solve.
And when you take on automation, let's just go there for a little bit. And some of the new capabilities, Mike, you talked about 5-axis machining and some of this, and you could have a piece of equipment with live tooling and all these other capabilities that really enhance your ability to deliver more to your customer, right? I think it really is important to separate the costing from the pricing. If I take 10 machine shops and look at them cost apart, they'll all swear they've got the right cost. But that cost all mirrors their process, right? And you guys know how many assumptions go into those things, right? So we talked earlier about keeping it simple, right? Sometimes it's as simple as, okay, I build up this cost and it tells me it's a 10% margin. I don't want that work. Sometimes it's an easier way to almost look at it in reverse and figure out how the customer's looking at it. So on the pricing side, what we tend to do is say, let's take the revenue from that part. Let's back off the material and outside costs that aren't ours. They're just pass-throughs, right? And then that tells us what we're getting paid for the part. Now divide that through by the hours, and you'll be surprised how consistent of a rate you will see between, let's say, machining capability or, let's say, Swiss mill activity, and you'll start to see predictable market rates for that capability. And when you start seeing costs that are incongruent with that or inconsistent with that, sometimes it's these underlying assumptions you have in your quoting system. So a great one is, let's talk about that automation. People will put in this amazing automation and then they don't have it filled right away. They'll get to the end of the year and say, okay, here's the cost of that automation each year, and we used it for 2,500 hours. That's my rate. Well, you used it for 2,500 hours, but you had 5,000 hours of capacity available.
Yeah.
Right. So are we going to set the rate?
Because you suck at automation.
Exactly. And so it becomes a little bit of a death spiral, right? Because now I'm trying to get an inflated rate and then put a margin on top of that versus saying, you know what, my capacity is 5,000. This is sort of the tolling rate per hour when I do that. And all of a sudden you start winning work and you're doing 5,000 hours of work and your profitability is going up, right? So I really think this notion of separating price from cost is important because it helps us. Markets are really efficient. You guys know this better than anybody, right? And so people aren't going to make more money in machining or metal fabrication or any kind of niche of manufacturing by getting a premium price consistently. It's your premium service, premium quality, and then a competitive price, right? So if you're getting something from a customer that says this isn't price competitive, it's a great opportunity to go back and start challenging some of those assumptions that are in our quoting system.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Like, someone can win on price one time, but how consistently can they deliver for that customer?
Yeah.
And I think that's what separates like the great shops, because anyone can go bid and win, and then you find out the more complex work has got a lot of scrap attached to it, and a lot of the tolerance for risk is kind of a huge factor here.
And a lot of setups, and maybe it's high mix and low volume, right? So, and then it takes a more advanced operator to do that type of work, right? So it's really hard to fill a shop with all high mix, low volume work. And sometimes you need some of that simpler work that can just kind of run in the background unattended with all that automation or 5-axis milling that we were just talking about.
Yeah. And Erik, I loved what you were saying. And to me, knowing what rate you can actually end up charging across all your different pieces of equipment, to me, it comes down to just having really good communication with your customers, right? Active follow-up, asking for feedback. Why didn't we win it? How far off were we? Putting that all into a system to close loop and sort of get better and better at trying to win that bread and butter work that you want to, mixed in with some real high margin, quick turn work that's, but it's too intensive to do all the time with every piece of equipment. But yeah, I think a lot of shops don't follow up enough. They don't ask enough probing questions. They're not really having those deep conversations about how can we be a better partner to you, and what do you need from us as a vendor to for us to win this work?
Right.
Yeah, and the shops that do it, I see have much greater success overall.
Well, and you think about it post-COVID, Paul, there's a lot of, I mean, we all know the bad actors out there. The people that tell you, hey, I can get it for, 50% what you're charging me and all. And so there's always going to be some of that. But those valued relationships you have and those good partnerships, post-COVID, people want reliability and quality and reliable supply as much as they want price. And so if a customer's giving you that signal, it's a good time to kind of question, again, the quoting assumptions. I'll give you a great example. Metal fabricator we worked with, and they were really feeling beat up. And they had a large customer that was about 25% of their business. And the customer called them one time and said, we just need to come meet with you because we just don't understand your pricing. And that's generally not a signal that you need to charge us more, right? So they're already struggling, and this customer's pushing on them. And we were having this conversation about quoting assumptions and how they were looking at things. And they had a mechanism in their quotes where they would add a burden rate to material. And so you put $1 of material in there. Well, I got to buy it. I got to handle it. I got to do all this stuff. So I'm going to put it in at $1.10 or $1.20 or whatever that is, right? Well, interestingly, they were having this conversation about quoting assumptions, and the salesperson, who was pretty emotional about it because they were feeling this pressure, said, listen, we just quoted a part. We just requoted a part that is 7% margin in our quoting system, and the customer tells us we're 40% high. And he looked at us and said, I don't care what assumptions you're talking about. There's no way you can meet that price. So we said, okay, let's pull up the quote. They pull up the quote. And remember, we talked about going in reverse. We took the revenue, we backed off the material and subcontract costs. And then we took the difference of that, divided it through by the hours on the quote. They were getting $107 an hour for that part. Their average earned rate per hour in the shop was $66. So guess what? The customer was right. So then we unpacked it and we said, okay, why is it showing at 7% margin? It was incredibly material intensive, but simple work. Mm-hmm. So it's like you took this material intensive piece and then you jacked up the cost in your system. And what is it telling you? I don't want simple, not complex, high volume work. Mm-hmm. So simple things like that can be really powerful in driving profitability and expanding work with customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people need to take the time to do those deep dives, though, because sometimes you just get stuck in like the status quo and you don't even realize you're killing yourself on those jobs.
We sometimes worry more about, and Mike really hit on it earlier, I think the theme out of this is let's worry about less of the accuracy of the costing and more about the understanding, right? If you understand what's really driving the cost, to Mike's point earlier, what type of work fits your shop, those types of things, it's a much better way to make sure we're filling the shop with good work that we can make money at than focusing on the nuance of a costing rate.
Yeah, Eric, I think in your example there, right, that understanding of the cost structure of the business for that owner is probably more valuable, right, than that winning that one particular order or keeping that work. And to be able to take that knowledge and then apply that going forward. But by going through that exercise, right, they got to a level of understanding of the business they simply didn't have before.
Well, what it did for them in that situation, exactly what you're saying, John, they would get bid packages from customers. This was in stamping, right? And so they were doing 125 different parts for this customer. But that one example helped them understand where their quotes would give them some maybe bad information. So what they realized was they were doing all the complex applications for their customers, and all the simple stuff the customer was dual sourcing with somebody else. Mm-hmm. So they use that knowledge to say, go back to those 2 or 3 key customers and say, listen, we're looking at this thing differently. Give us an opportunity to rebid, requote all this stuff and what customer doesn't want to manage one versus two or three vendors, right? And so they were able to win a bunch of work and grow the shop just by looking at one of those biases in their quoting a little differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not the topic of the show today, but this idea of which you can kind of equate to revenue per employee, but how much of it is created value versus pass through value.
Sure.
Right. You know, in my shop, our average material cost was like 10 to 15%. Right. It was low. So if we're marking it up 10%, it's not a big deal. It's like 1 point. But if you have a shop that's like 60, 70% pass through because the material is so expensive, yeah, you can blow yourself out of the water. And then when you're looking at even like Mike Payne, that like top shops, you know, and like revenue per employee is one of the metrics. Like it's not apples and apples. Like you could have a shop that has 2 or 3 times the revenue per employee, but they're just mostly trading dollars and, you know, adding very little value to that product. But anyway, I'd say that the more value you're adding, I mean, in both cases, you really got to factor in, you know, what the situation is at your shop and be really thoughtful. Maybe to Mike's point, understanding it is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think the only place that I think maybe I'm going to offer a little bit different opinion, because, you know, we do some high value material jobs that there's a lot more value in the material than the labor. Mm-hmm. We try to stay away from those. Lots of times that's where they'll push us towards a no bid. But there is, though, still a lot of cost in buying that material, paying for it, and then potentially waiting 60, 90, 120 days to get paid too, right?
So there's risk for scrapping it.
And and then there's the risk for scrapping it. And so I understand everything you guys are saying there, but on the same hand, I'm thinking of it from a carrying cost of capital perspective too. So there's a lot of cost in carrying that expensive material for, you know, maybe 2, 3, 4 months or longer.
Mike, let me add something to what you're saying, because I think we actually agree on that point. I think the issue I was getting at with this company is they already took their interest cost, some of the other overhead costs. Those were already sitting in the rates they're quoting.
Gotcha.
Right. So you just got to be careful. We're not double dipping on those things. Right. So,
right. Yeah. So, you're not covering it in overhead and in.
Because you're right. No, if I've got you're right. You might expand your warehouse. You might have some Kanbans that you're keeping for customers. All those things, right? That do increase cost. And so, but if those are already sitting in the rates, in the burden and overhead rates you're charging, then when you do a special index on the material cost, now you're double dipping, and that's where it can start to hurt you.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
That's solid. So one of the things we're talking about at our business right now is budgeting and forecasting. And, you know, my whole sales team has to say, okay, here's our forecast. So here's what we think we're going to do. And we're very segmented at our company. We have all these different business units sharing resources and working together. So our forecast is the sum of, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different business units forecast. And so, you know, my team forecasts the top line, and we do the best we can. It's hard to know the future, but then we use that to kind of figure everything else out. And so we're budgeting accordingly. What's your position on forecasting? How essential is it? How detailed should you be when forecasting? Because I think it's Q4 now, right? So
Nick, I think it's just a formality. I don't think it adds any value. No, I'm just kidding. This is Nick, you're
cool, because I hate doing it.
Yeah. Leave that to the bean counters. No, Nick, you're right. Yeah, we're entering Q4, and as you're talking through your process there, right, you're starting with the top line, which we're making a lot of assumptions there. There's going to be some work that you have, some known business, and then you're making assumptions there about what you're going to go and get for work. Where I think the value in forecasting lies is really, it forces you to understand the business and the cost structure at a detailed level, similar to the example that Erik was giving, because you're thinking about, okay, here's what we're going to do for sales next year, and you've got volume and you've got a different mix of products. But now it forces you to understand those relationships there between the volume, how that affects your margin, and taking it down through your financials and understanding, what do we need to make here for investments in equipment or people to be able to deliver that sales volume. And to me, I think the value of this is in having a plan, but it's also in the psychology of we're going to understand our costs, what we expect. Now we're going to look at the results when they come in. This is what we thought. This is what actually transpired. But there's that psychology there of we're creating accountability around the numbers because we put it down on paper. This is what we said we're going to do. Did we do it? What happened? Right? It's never going to go as planned, but what did we learn from that? And then what can we apply to the business going forward? And by going through and doing this exercise, it really forces you to have that type of understanding of the business. And then when you see the actual results, it forces you to question what happened. Why is I was producing something that was really, this thing was 70% margin, right? Why don't I see that on my bottom line? Well, maybe I didn't have the volume that month.
Yeah.
And we're getting
so good. So what we're doing at our business immediately after I stop recording is we're building out what we call like a business model canvas. And we're testing the current state of each of our business models at each business unit. We're comparing that to our P&L and saying what our business model looks like today produces this kind of a result. And then as we go into next year, we start to say like, well, if we want to make adjustments to the business model, launch a new product, hire a different staff, find a new partnership and outsource certain things that we were doing inside, whatever, how does that change the business model? And then what will change in our forecast because of it? And so I think if you're just like, hey, sales, give me a number, we got to like use a bunch of formulas and get to our budget, you're really doing yourself a disservice instead of like what you were recommending. Do this exercise, really understand your business model and make sure like how you're going to win or lose. And I think you can only do so well in a broken business model.
Right.
So you have to think holistically. Maybe we need to make big changes, or maybe one of these business units we need to shut down, or maybe we need to create a brand new business unit. For a company that's so diversified like mine, it's not one business model that produces the result. It's a bunch of them working together and sharing resources. And we're taking it to a new level this year. So it's encouraging that you're agreeing with our approach.
And all those members of your team, right, each of those business units, they're going through this process. They're gaining this understanding. And also it creates that accountability or some ownership over the plan.
Yeah. And especially with, like we were talking about cost accounting, with so many different aspects of our business sharing resources, it's like, well, why am I being charged for that machine or this person? I don't use this person. It's like, all right, well, let's talk about it now and get this sorted out. So that's good.
So I don't know who to best direct this question to, but let's say, a shop owner out there is listening to this and they know that they just aren't making enough profit. What are some of the things they can do to increase their overall profit at the end of the year?
I would say start by looking at objectively what the source of the profitability issue is. And I will tell you, in 9 out of 10 shops, the vast majority of the profitability issues are going to be cost and capacity that is there that's not being sold to the customer. And I can't stress that enough, because if you've sustained, if you've been in business through great financial crisis, .com, but I mean, these shops have been around for a long time, so they're good at what they do. When there's a persistent profitability problem, 9 out of 10 times that's the source of the issue. And it's taking that step back and look at it really simply to say, okay, what do I have to do now to either A, reduce the cost that I have, which means also reducing capacity, or B, what's the right way to utilize that last 20%?
At the same token, I know there's shops out there that are just busy, and their spindles they're trying to keep them running as much as they can, but they're still just not making the margin that on paper they should be. And I've always thought that the Pareto principle applies to job costing, right? 20% of your jobs are causing 80% of your losses. If you're not doing accurate job costing, you just don't, you have a gut feel maybe, but you don't know actually which ones are contributing to those losses. And we had this practice at our shop we called Kill the Losers. And every month we would look at our job costing and sort it by worst profit. And then we'd dive into those and say, what happened here? Did I misquote it? Did we just, was the material way more than we thought? Did we, miss it on labor hours? And then systematically decide, can we fix the process? Do we need to, raise the price, fire the customer? There's only a certain number of things you can do, but I'd just love to hear maybe Mike Estes, your thoughts on that process.
Yeah, I don't like the word fire the customer. We let them deselect our customers, right? Or we let them self-select, right? So we go through and we actually look at the cost and say, okay, stratify your business, A, B, C's, D's, right? And you look at your dogs and cats and say, hey, I'm losing on the dogs and cats. Why? To your point, understanding exactly why I'm losing those D's. Is it because of setup issues? Is it because of labor utilization? They're just hard jobs to do, and I'm taking a lot more labor to do those than I am. Then I deselect those. I deselect them either by telling the customer I don't want the business, or I raise the cost of that product so that the customer deselects themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So that I don't ruin a relationship and just say, listen, hey guys, I'm running twice the labor on these jobs. I have 3 times the setups. I have to raise the cost of these and let them deselect. And then that allows us to focus on the things that we're really good at. And I think a lot of times we get caught into that spiral that Erik was talking about, is that we have to fill the shop, we have to fill the shop, we have to fill the shop. And a lot of times there are things we don't want in our shop because of that very reason. There's too many setups. Mm-hmm. We're not measuring labor utilization on each and every one of those jobs and making sure that we're really, really focused on those things that are contributing value to us every single day.
So is it safe to say you don't like firing customers, but you do like killing losers?
I do, absolutely. I do. Not only do I deselect customers, I also deselect SKU. At some point, I don't want to make a bad SKU, right? I mean, there are deselection of stratification of my ABCDs, both for customers and for SKUs, and then say, okay, I don't mind making this SKU if I can sell it for twice as much, right?
Right.
So make sure that I understand my cost structure and then go through that stratification process.
Well, I got to say, this was just an awesome episode. You guys make finance and accounting interesting. And I got to tell you, that is like almost a miracle for Nick Goldman. Okay. But I'm serious. I mean, these are the things we're talking about in all of our meetings. I have to go make it to that business model canvas meeting, or else
you can come in sounding like you know what you're talking about.
My brother, our president, will kill the loser before I even get into the room. So, but yeah, gosh, thank you guys so much for the wisdom that you give to the metalworking nation. We absolutely love having you on, and I can't wait for the next one.
Hey, it's Paul from Making Chips. If you've been burned by recruiters who don't understand manufacturing, you are not alone. That's exactly why we created Hire MFG Leaders. We're not just recruiters, we're current and former shop owners, and we know what it takes to lead in this industry. Whether you're hiring your next operations leader, sales manager, or production supervisor, we'll help you find someone who actually fits. Learn more at makingchips.com/hire. Yeah, so if people want to learn more about CLA services, how do you recommend they reach out?
Well, you can find us at claconnect.com. Great resources on there. There's a page that's tailored to the manufacturing industry. We frequently have events and content that we publish. You can certainly connect with any of the 3 of us here as well. Always happy to have a conversation and see if we can help.
What's the best way for them to reach the 3 of you?
Our emails are just our first name last name at CLA Connect.
So we'll put it in the show notes for everybody.
Perfect.
So many people are going to want to email you guys. We're going to get a huge subscriber list. I can already feel it.
I'll throw in there too. Jon mentioned the content they make available. I would highly recommend you go, like anybody, just go follow CLA on, LinkedIn, some of the different social media platforms, because it feels like every day or two you guys are putting something out that's very, very valuable to manufacturers to pay attention to, whether it's tax law changes, job costing. I mean, there's always great content to follow along with.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mike. There's certainly a lot going on right now. So taxes, tariffs, technology.
That's a lot of T's.
Enjoyed the conversation, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we end the show the same way every time. I don't know if you guys have heard it enough to be able to do it for us, but do you know how to do it? John, maybe?
I think
John,
I do.
probably.
Yeah. So, right, Eric and Mike, if we're not making chips, we're not making money.
Yeah. All right. Bam.